Hi, I'm Jay Huey and I want to talk about grief and grieving for a parent that you have lost through alcohol misuse. I actually lost my dad to alcohol abuse and I was just 22 months away from being 21. And I remember the day very clearly when the police came to my work and I I I knew it was probably to do with my dad, but I thought that maybe he'd had an accident or got himself into trouble or something like that. Obviously, I knew his alcohol misuse was quite bad, and he was really struggling. But I didn't expect death. I didn't expect them to say, "I'm sorry, but your dad's passed away." Um, and obviously, not everybody that is coping with somebody's death, um, it will be a shock. It could be that they've been unwell in hospital for a long time, but for me, this just came out of the blue. Um, so the sort of first stage of grief that we know is denial. I think definitely hit me, and I found it extremely difficult to process what was going on. I was in shock, and I remember just acting and kind of organising and doing things because that was how I coped. And I know my sister found that really difficult, but that was just how I dealt with it. Um, I didn't allow myself to process any feelings and acknowledge kind of too much around what I was going through. It was all like, let's just get all this sorted. In hindsight, you could say that was kind of callous, but that's just where I was. And I think it's important to know that there is no right and wrong way of grieving, and nobody likes the feelings of grief because it hurts. And some of the stages of grief, we go through, and it helps us in denial. It helps us to, think that this isn't really happening, and it kind of delays the inevitable, but it helps us in that moment, and we do whatever we need to do in order to cope. So I then did go through the anger stage, thinking about all the things that had happened, all the things he'd said and done to me and to the rest of the family, and wanting to punish him, wanting to punish myself for things that I feel like I should have done. And obviously you can't change those things once the person has passed away, but you still go through the emotions. And I think one of the biggest things I can say to anybody is that we do have to allow ourselves to go through this process, because if we try and skip the process and just not deal with it, it will affect you, your mental health and in your physical body. And we do need to process it and get it out. And whilst the feelings are not comfortable, and there may be times where you never feel like you'll get through it, but that's because you're thinking with the mind that you've got now, with the knowledge that you've got now. And cheesy as it is, time is a great healer. And obviously I don't feel the same way today that I did all those years ago when my dad passed away. So time has helped me. Time has allowed me to see things more clearly, to allow me to learn, to find out more about alcohol misuse, maybe what my dad went through. And it's then given me much more compassion, which I never had at the time, because I was so angry and frustrated with all the chaos and all the things that he'd done. I had so much anger about it that I found it really difficult to, as anyone would, just, forget it. And I think that when someone's died, even though some of us do say we hate our parents, for the drinking, for what they've done, there's an element of us that still loves them and has that hope that they'll be the parent that we always wanted them to be. And I think that I had a lot of that anger that came up about, how dare he do that to me? How dare he treat me that way? How, and also anger that he was no longer here, and there's no time frame in terms of what, it's not a clear cut. You're in this stage, in the denial stage for 2 months, then you move into the anger stage. It doesn't work like that. Yeah, I'm sure you realise that. And sometimes we don't go through every single stage of grief. We, might skip one of the stages. It's your experience. So what you go through is what you go through. And so the anger, I think, for me was something that really affected me a lot, and I didn't let go of quite a lot of anger for very many years, and it did take me time to kind of get my head around what had happened. The next stage of grief is something called bargaining, and it isn't something that I personally went through myself, but if you're going through, if your parent is in the hospital really unwell, and sadly their death is expected, bargaining can be when you're, usually to a higher power, you're saying, please let them live. I will be different. I will do this. I will do that. I will exchange something. I will, this sort of bargaining that you do. But that's not something that I experience. So all I can do is tell you that that's one of the stages. I don't know how it would feel, but I can guess that if it was somebody that I loved and that I didn't want to die, that I would do anything to save them, as anyone would. So I can understand the concept of it, but it's not something that's necessarily going to change anything, but it can potentially give us some comfort sometimes, in the hope that something might happen to save this person, and we can kind of cling on to that hope, which can be helpful sometimes and sometimes not helpful, because it stops us getting to this point of acceptance. So for me, after anger probably came the depression side. I wouldn't say I was in sort of full depression or anything. I would say that the sort of deep sadness, and the recognition that this person has gone, and like trying to make sense of it, trying to understand, was definitely something I experienced, and something that maybe you have experienced or are going through right now. And it can sink you into a place where you can't see how you can get out of it. And then finally is the stage of acceptance. And this stage doesn't necessarily mean that you won't feel any unpleasant emotions, but it will be that you accept that this person has passed, and you accept that they're no longer going to be in your life, and that you can't speak to them again or have a conversation or do anything with them anymore. And in a sense, I think it brings a sense of peace to some degree. You'll always remember that person, you'll always remember the experiences that you had with them. And I think sometimes you can flip back between acceptance, and then you can get back to a stage of anger, and it can kind of go on like that, really. But for me, when I lost my dad, it's not really till years later now that I think I really do miss having a dad, having somebody that I can chat to, that could help me with my car, that could do practical things, because he was really sort of DIY handy, but also just to talk through things with him, and for him to see how I've progressed in my life, and the things that I've done. But also, is that a fantasy? Is that my virtual reality that never actually existed, but it's the one that I hoped would be in real life if he was sober? So again, you might be experiencing that as well, years later. Depends when your loved one passed. But for me, years later, I sort of think I really miss the person that I knew he was when he wasn't drinking, but I rarely saw that. But I miss, and I idolise, I suppose, and I hope that one day I would have had a dad that I could have, that dad that I saw when he wasn't drinking. And I miss that person. I don't miss the drunk. I don't miss all the things that he said and did, which were unspeakable at times. But also I have learnt compassion, I've learned understanding, I've learnt that he probably went through awful things in his life, so it's allowed me to be much more objective. But the pain of losing somebody, even when you think you hate them is excruciating, and it can be confusing because you think, why am I getting so upset about someone that I hate, that has treated me badly and da da da, all these other things. And you know, this stuff doesn't make logical sense. Our emotions are our emotions, and you know, deep down there is something within you, within me, that, you know, I still cared for my dad. Because of the person I knew he could be and he was. And I know a lot of daughters of alcoholics talk about that, you know, the person they could be, and families, you know, family members also talk about that. So I think, you know, in terms of offering you some sort of comfort, you know, it does get better with time. And I think for me, the thing that I could have done better to help myself was allow myself to feel the feelings that I had, to ask for help, and to know that it's okay not to have your shit together, and that you have all these conflicting feelings. That's really normal, and just to be patient. And I know in this day and age that can be quite hard to be patient, because, you know, we live in a world that's so fast paced, but I think that that's something that we need to show ourselves, the kindness, the compassion, and to recognise that even though the feelings that you're having don't feel very nice, they're normal, and pushing them away, in my honest opinion, is the worst thing you can do. Sometimes we have to park them for a minute, depending on the situation we're in, but choosing not to deal with it at all is not an option. You need to go through that process if not for anything, it's for yourself, to allow you to heal. And that's what this is all about, because unfortunately they're not here anymore, so they're not feeling anything. We're the ones that are experiencing it. So be kind to yourself in that, allow yourself to feel the way you do, and be patient. So I hope that's given you some comfort. And you know, if you do want any more help, if you're the daughter of an alcoholic, then please do join my Facebook group if you're not in it already. And you can always get me on email, joe@joehuey.co.uk. I'd love to hear from you. All right, take care. Bye.